Pim, 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 pim. Arula, yeah. Is it functioning properly? I need to check. We need to see. Is it working properly, or is it not doing its functions the way in which it should try to work? Because it is something that we need to have working. And because if it is not working, oh no, yeah, okay, it is working. So let me get this straight over here. Let me close some stuff. Let me also move this. Also, let me. I forgot to take the shot. I am amazing. Let me take this to over here. And we define. We are. I I don't know. What I was going to say. I hope the bot works properly, but taking into account that the last time it didn't really work that much, well, I cannot really say anything. We can only pray for it to work, and if it doesn't want to work, we cannot also do anything about it. So yeah, let me start more properly. Let me mute this. Let me activate the audio. YouTube, I have it here. Yeah, we should be ready to transition over here. And there it is. Yeah, right. Properly. Well, moo, 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 moo. Very well. We we're basically done. If I am not wrong. Ah, oh my god, I'm sorry for being sleepy. I just woke up from a nap. So the other day we went over the lecture number 5, and it was about basically vision and the different ways in which vision is related to psychology, and the different ways in which a psychologist might analyze and might also consider vision as something. I think it was more than anything else as something interesting and something worth of analyzing, because at the end of the day, vision by itself doesn't really represent anything. It's only when you put it into perspective that you see and properly observe if it is worth or not pondering. So yeah, basically that. Now, my God, we need to continue with the lecture number 6. In this case, the wait. Also, allow me to do this. I think I can pin multiple things in pins. I think I don't know. Let me do that and try to pin this. Yes, I want to pin that, and also wait. When I want to unpin it, unpin after binary end. Yeah. No. No. It unpin the other message. This is so sad. Well, um, anyways, let me see. I am forgetting something. I think I'm not right. Okay. Anyways, so if I'm not forgetting anything, we might as well start, because it also is kind of true that we have a little bit of a constraint clock to wait. So we need to properly get this going. Yeah, I hope I am not forgetting anything else. We have a background sound. Yeah, there it is. Then.
So
Okay.
last week, Melissa told you, or last couple days ago, about vision. And if there's two huge messages, I think, out of that lecture, it's first, that even the most simple aspects of perception are based on a synthesis between what's out there and the rules by which your mind interprets the world. And what you ultimately see is that interaction, that synthesis, that dialogue, that construction between what's out there and how your mind chooses to interpret it. The second big point is that there's a lot of organization of the visual system in our brain. And we can track its organization from the first moment that photons enter your eyes all the way through until you recognize a loved one, a word, or an object out there. And we said that in the neocortex, the world is divided into two big channels of visual processing, which are what things are and where things are, right? Okay. So now I'm going to pick up on that a little bit today. As you go around and see things all the time, what is it that you mostly see? On an average day, you wake up in the morning.
Objects.
You see, I know you're like, what's he looking for? What's the answer? But just in everything, you see people, right? A lot. So faces, we'll talk about that. You see objects, chairs, tables. In the morning, a toothbrush and soap is useful, right? You see objects. And another huge use of your visual system is reading. You see words, right? On books, on computers. So we're going to talk about a little bit about how we see what things are, objects in the world, faces in the world, and words, so that we can read. And we'll talk about both how some processes that go on in our mind and brain that let us become terrific at recognizing what's out there and knowing who we're talking to, what we're reading, what we're holding, and so on. And then about disorders in the brain that illuminate, I think, a little bit about those processes.
But wait, okay, a moment, second. Okay, here, please. First pause, then. I need to organize a little bit what I have on my mind. So, if it is going to be something related to the ways in which we observe the world, it's also related, so to speak, to the way in which vibration or mental world also changes or something like that. I do not get it completely. And I hope it isn't because I am sleepy that I don't get it. I will expect it to be something more aching to the fact that sometimes the ways in which the ideas are conveyed gets shortened. But anyways, I will guess and I will kind of interpret all of this as, let's say, this whole thing of having to recognize objects and having to recognize faces and also having to put together words, let's say, at the end of the day, shouldn't they be considered even more another kind of object, the most complex one probably, or the object that is contained inside other objects? But well, all of that should be also taken into consideration, probably as something that plays, I don't think a big role, but a meaningful one in the collection and even more in the whole side of, let's say, yeah, analysis and meta-analysis of the different things that pertain to the realm of understanding and even more to the realm of interpretations. But I guess, yeah, it is interesting at the very least to see how it is that we can yeah, are we going to see some ways in which it can be even more increased? Because he said how it is that we are terrific at doing this particular thing, but in the sense of how an average human is terrific, or how somebody could become even better at recognizing patterns in their life so that they can see the world in a more clear manner. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
So let me start with objects and agnosia. Agnosia means not knowing. So we're going to talk about two ways in which people have seemed to not know, and that gives us a hint then about how we actually do know. And they've been called apperceptive and associative agnosias. Apperceptive seems to be people see the parts, but they don't pull it together. Associative agnosia, they see the whole thing pretty decently, but they can't figure out what it means, what it is in a practical sense. And lastly, I'll talk to you about a very surprising finding where people lose knowledge of some kinds of objects in the world, but not others, and sort of give us a new insight into how our brain organizes knowledge. So agnosia is a modality-specific inability. So we'll talk today about vision. There's agnosias in audition and in touch and so on. I'll focus just on vision, modality-specific. These people are fine if they hold something or hear something. And it's not explained by things like you don't see so well, or you're not paying attention, or you can't speak. It seems to be just that you lose the ability to recognize by sight what something is. So again, apperceptive agnosia will link it to the right hemisphere, and associative agnosia to the left hemisphere. And let me show you examples of what these patients do. Here's patients with right hemisphere damage who are attempting simply to copy this triangle or copy these things. It's right in front of them, they're copying it, and you can see that it's as if they had almost no appreciation for what the thing is out there. This is a pretty miserable 3, okay? Right in front of you.
Wow.
It's as if the whole thing weren't cohering for anything. Even the shape is just a mysterious bundle of stuff. Or we can make a multiple choice. Well, multiple choice we know is easier, right? So all they have to do is cross out which of these 4 things looks like this. And they pick the circle here, or instead of the X, they pick the O, right? They're really not getting almost anything about the quality.
What? What is this, my bro? What? What? Was it explained how this happens? Why isn't calculus? What? Why is it? Have I heard about this concept before in my life? Have I really never heard about it before? What? It is very, yeah, I think important to point out something like this. You know, man, what the fuck? It is very, very preoccupying. What the fuck? I don't know. I don't know. I, I don't know. Aside from the human's reaction is, I guess, it, it is to be expected that they have a hard time really understanding their reality if the part of the brain which is in charge of interpreting the different objects which they encounter is not functioning so well. The only thing that is kind of amazing is to see that those people are in some ways still alive, taking into consideration that they might as well confuse themselves on what is a phone, what is a book, what is, well, I don't think it is that normal, but what is a gun, and what are all of those different things, you know? So I don't know, I don't know. It seems interesting at the very least to observe the different side of, yeah, there is an underlying problem, and at the same time, the problem is not so big that it impedes these people from uh, properly functioning at the very
Falling
least.
into
I don't
shape.
know.
They're really not recognizing what they're looking at. Or, they'll see something, they'll see this, but they'll read it as,
Mhm.
when they get this, 7415. They won't take the first interpretation you will, they'll come up with some other, okay? When these patients copy
Mhm.
something, they see right in front of them the elephant, you can see, you can label things, but it's a pretty bad copy. It's not just bad artistry, okay? It's a bad sense of what the coherent shape is in front of you, right in front of them, and their vision is basically fine. It's just the shape of it doesn't make any sense. Not surprisingly, then, maybe these patients also struggle when you make things a little harder. So what letter is this? You can get that. You'd have to look a little bit harder. Or you might get that this is a cow or this is a car. These patients are terrible at those things. As soon as you make it a little bit hard, they're finished. Uh, they're also bad if they have damage in the right hemisphere posteriorly at what they call an unusual view. So often we see something like a stapler from this view. We rarely quite see it this way, but if I showed you this, you could probably make it out. It might take you a moment by itself, okay? An unusual view of an object that you see. Psychologists call it a canonical view, but just the usual one. And what happens to patients who have damage in
Canonical.
the right posterior cortex? They're terrible at making this unusual perception of a common object. They're also terrible if they have to see something that's a little bit challenging. Again, like here's some hats, but with shadows. Now, normally, we don't think about shadows as a big problem. It is for computers that are meant to see. And it is also a big problem for patients with damage to the right posterior cortex. It's as if they can't pull out the object from the shadow. It's all one big glob to them.
I mean, in that sense, it coherently makes complete connection with what I was kind of explained before. I see it as the way in which the brain interprets the reality in those patients malfunctions because somehow I will say the different ways in which the deepness of everything gets mixed. And when you have to such a level a problem with properly finding and properly attributing the different sides of what really constitutes, let's say, the whole reality itself pertaining the part only existing in holy fucking god, uh, only existing in the side, yeah, the sides and the more proper and more interesting, not more interesting, more important um, parts of the brain related to the act of recognizing and properly putting together the different parts of an object and creating that and matching it into a reality, not into a reality, into an image that you already understand in your mind, so that you can attribute that particular concept to what you're observing. When that fails so much, mm, it will probably be unavoidable that they will struggle so, yeah, to such incredible levels to properly be observers of their world. But I guess, is there any, aside from, I will guess, pills or something like that, is going to be a cure in the case of it being a problem caused by a lack of brain choices, no matter what it is. But I don't think if, let's say, if it was caused by an accident, how would you train somebody to regain that capacity? Probably, okay, I will say like this. Probably the interest and the biggest factor motivating the regain of this particular capacity in those who lose lost it will be slowly stimulating the brain, very, as I said before, very, very slowly, so that these people can not only observe what it is that they have in front of them, but also try to properly, how to say it, try to properly put together in more complex scenarios the same thing together. Let's say the example was a word that was this also separated enough so that when you lack the capacity of putting together the whole scenery, you only see the different numbers that are there. In that case, you slowly integrate first the whole word, then you start slowly chopping up some parts, not that it really becomes numbers that also can be a word, then you really make it numbers, then you really break it down into simple lines, and then you make it even dots or something like that. I guess the way in which we could try to solve it is by properly taking into account that it needs to be regress or it needs to be taken from the first part that they can properly do, and also trying to measure which is that they can really do, no matter what it is the conditions for them. Because if we also lack the understanding as to what it is that they are or not being capable of doing, trying to work on things that we do not really know if they were really understanding or not is kind of meaningless. I think. And so, well, continue. Continuing.
Compare that difficulty in just getting basically what's there. Patients with left hemisphere damage who can't recognize an object. So here's a patient who was shown pictures of a key, a pig, a bird, a train, and was asked to copy them. And the copies are actually excellent. I mean, they're much better than I would do. Okay,
Yeah.
excellent copies, right? But even after the patient has made that excellent copy of a key, he's asked, what is that? And the patient says, I don't know. Good copy of a pig could be a dog or any other animal. Like, yeah, that's a dog, but that's it. The bird is kind of interesting. He draws a pretty good bird, his copy, right? But then he says it could be a beech stump. And when you say that, you can see that, but you and I would never, come to that conclusion. And the train, he gets a little bit, a wagon or car of some kind. It's a larger being pulled by a smaller. He vaguely knows it's something, but it's not quite right either, right? But he really gets what it is, the shape, but it's as if it's stripped of meaning. It just doesn't mean anything to him. Now we're going to do a video in a moment, sorry, and I'm going to show you some videos today. The problem is that these videos are sort of grainy and there's not really high quality Alan Alda talking unscientific American videos of these patients. So the unfortunate thing is in a visual disorders demonstration, it's almost as if I'm forcing upon you that same visual disorder, okay? Because you're looking at it and you go like, gee, no wonder he can't recognize it, I can't recognize it. So let me tell you, then in a couple of moments, he's going to look at a picture of a clarinet, okay? And if it were a really good video, you would see it clearly, but there's just not many of these around, and these patients are rarely this perfect. So I'm going to make this dark. And we'll see, thank you, Colin. A patient with visual agnosia. And you should be impressed by two things. First, he's very verbal, he's speaking smart, a lot of his brain is working just fine. Second,
Do not show the recording.
you're going to see something really interesting, which is, we talked about the WHERE system last time. And some people call the WHERE system the system for action. Because pretty much like where you grab something, where you move, that has a lot to do with the action, the physical action in the world. So you're going to see this man unable to recognize by his what system what he's looking at. But a little bit of information is going to sneak into his WHERE system and move his hands, okay, in a way that you'll see appropriate. So thanks.
Yeah. Copyright. Amazing. I love it. I knew it.
This idea that we only use 10% of our brain. I can assure you this man has, 95, 98% of his brain. He can speak, he can move, he can make jokes, and he can curse at the end there a little bit. He can do almost everything that everybody can do, but he cannot identify what an object is by vision, right? Because the injury has occurred in the part of the brain that's
And so wait, I think it was kind of mentioned before. The idea that we only utilize 10% of our brain was probably born from this study in particular that he's shown, where it is recognized that very particular things only occupy between 1 or 0.1% of the brain activity itself, because the whole brain is a symphony of things happening all at the same time, and trying to measure particular things makes it harder for the people who is really trying to analyze anything, because you need to really pin down exactly what it is that you are measuring and strip everything else from your measurements. And in that sense, it is that it ended up being said the brain has 10% of its capacities utilized, um, because people thought it was basically an idea. Yeah, because somebody probably misunderstood the idea that if you were using completely all of your brain, we will at the very best only be able to measure 10% of it. So I think it was the explanation for that. I think I don't know completely
The
remember.
final step of figuring out what you're looking for. So depending on, it's a very specific part of the brain, but without it, the rest of his brain can't figure out
Huh?
what it's looking at. So his sensation is fine. He sees where it is, and he gets a shape even roughly. He knows, like he thought it was a pen. I mean, there's something vaguely about the shape. His naming is fine, but what it's as if, again, this idea of a perfect example of what we call associative agnosia. He has all the shape information, it seems like you ought to have, all the language information you have, but he can't make that move from piecing together what something is to knowing what it means. And if he doesn't know what it means, he can't come up with the name, right? Okay? If he smells it or holds it, he says apple, or right, or pipe, okay? He knows the name, but if he has to look at something and then know what it is to name it, right? If I show you a piece of paper and ask you to name it, you have to say, okay, what is it? Then I name it, right? He can't make that move in vision to what it is, right? Because so much processing has to occur in your brain to get there, even though it seems instantaneous and trivial to you.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, I will kind of propose another theory, and that is, in this particular case, it happens that these people struggle so much with properly observing what it is that they have in front of them, not because the reality itself of the object is completely alien to them, because the professor itself also clarified that they can, by other, what is it? By other, holy, I lost the word. By other sensations? No, by other senses. That is, by other senses, they can still know what it is that they are dealing with. But in the particular case of the vision, probably in the case of the, I don't remember the name. I'm gonna force me to say the name. The ones who struggle with putting together complex images into a reality are only dealing with complex things. In this case, it happens that no matter what gets input to them, and no matter what enters their brain, the whole side of this is even more complex, because even more parts of the brain are affected, or yeah, I would say probably different parts of the brain are affected, because in a deeper level they can't even really understand some real sides of this, in the sense of, okay, yeah, this is exactly what I am dealing with, and this is exactly what I am spending my time trying to comprehend. So yeah, I guess in a sense I see them also as something kind of close, and at the same time not so close.
It's instantaneous and
You
trivial
know?
to you because your brain is so brilliant, okay, that it accomplishes it. Okay. So now there are things out there in the world, like animals that occur naturally, that because they're, from an evolutionary tree, they share a lot of shapes. And there's things out there that are not living, either that occur like the moon and the mountain, out there sitting, or what we call manufactured objects, things like locks, pencils, motorcycles, bulbs, things that humans have made. And of course, humans make shapes, as they need to construct things, right? They're not constrained by evolutionary forces about what shape something is. We make a shape as we need it. But it was still an amazing discovery in the 1980s that they find individual patients who lost the ability to recognize things in very specific categories. This seems so much like old-style, silly phrenology that I can tell you my colleagues sort of made fun of me when I told them people in my field were finding this, okay? So they found patients who could define or by pictures, manufactured objects, things like pencils or typewriters or computers, but they couldn't identify foods or animals. And then they found patients just the opposite, who could identify foods and animals, but not manufactured objects. So that's really weird. That's as if you had it organized in your brain, the manufactured section here, like in a supermarket, and here's the animal section, and here's the fruit section, right? I mean, is that how our mind is organized, like a supermarket? But then there were some exceptions to these, and these are the exceptions that helped us inform us on the rule. So here's the patients who are really good at identifying manufactured things, again, pencils, things like that. bad at foods and animals. But now think about this: they were good on body parts. So how are they good on body parts when they were bad at foods and animals? Body parts are natural, right? And they were bad on musical instruments, even though they were good on other manufactured things like pencils and computers. Okay, so these were two wrong things. And I'm going to try to convince you in a moment that the way we now understand this is they're good at body parts because we know how to use our body, and they're bad at musical instruments because musical instruments look an awful lot like one another, just like four-legged animals look a lot like one another. Okay, there's a funny category for us if we start to divide up instruments. So the problem is not so much one of natural versus unnatural things. It's things that we know through vision
Holy
versus things that we
fucking
know through physical
god!
action and use. And here's another example: the patients who are bad at objects that we use every day, like pencils and stuff like that, were pretty good on things like billboards and mountains. Now, only in science fiction movies do you have creatures big enough that they're picking up billboards and throwing it at helicopters from the military. You see that all the time. You have the big creature and they pick it up and they hurl it, right? Okay, so we don't mostly pick up huge things like mountains and large outdoor objects like flagpoles, right? They're not things that we pick up and use. And so the question, so it seems like the principle of what's good or bad is more about how we experience things through sight or through physical action. So how do we know things in the world? Through visual experience.
Okay, I was trying to give my dogs a fucking second to shut up, but it isn't going to happen, so I might as well. While having the constant barking in the background, start talking. I guess it also happens that in some cases, I, I, I do not see why it would be weird to have different parts of the memory um, designed to allocate different types of information. At the end of the day, the ways in which we feel in ourselves and emotions activates different parts of the brain. It is not the same to activate the front, to activate the middle, to activate the upper middle, the lower middle, to activate the back side of the brain itself. It, yeah, they in general are not even close to being related one to the other. They only not come, I don't think. They only play gracefully their songs when you have the possibility of seeing them as things that are separated, but in some way, not in some way probably, in the sense of the different connections that we possess inside of ourselves, we have the capacity of adapting all of that into a single congruent reality. And in that same sense, I will even expect it. Yeah, I was expecting more of a different explanation, like we also, those who had the problem of not being able to comprehend animals and all of that, yet were able to see hands, and while also comprehending objects, not being able to really comprehend something like an instrument, I will guess it has more to deal with the side of I see a lot of times, at least myself, the tool that we possess as let's say for example hands. mm, a hand is a lot more mechanical than what it might seem at first. Because yes, the movements themselves are physical, and yes, the physical extension that we realize is also only physical. But at the same time, it isn't limited to being physical, nor it is obliged to be only physical. You, on the realm of the muscle memory, you can even start doing things without really paying attention. And in that same sense, it happens with the music or with the musical instruments that we create such a second nature with those objects, and even more, we possess the capacity of integrating them almost as another extension of ourselves. That it will be, yeah, self-explanatory. The fact that those people will really struggle to identify musical instruments when the whole array of things, a lot of times I will expect a musical instrument to be considered more of a natural thing instead of a manufactured one. I would say probably in that same example, I would have liked to know if it was that every single instrument was a failure, or for example, if something like a piano or an organ was more understandable than what was it, a harp, I think, a harp, a guitar, things like that. So yeah, I don't know. It it seemed to me that it was another different response, but we will never really know what the proper one is. So yeah, I'm forgetting how to tell it. I think I'm not. I am not, but also the fucking dogs distracted me so sorry. Well, we shall continue.
Experience. Most of us don't get, unless we're alligator wrestlers, we don't get that near that many animals. And most of us, have other things that we use all the time, like bulbs and pencils and things like that. And evidence for that was this. They put humans inside a scanner and looked at their brains as they named either line drawings or words. Let's think of words. So it's just words, and you're naming things like elephant and tiger, that's the animal, or tools that you use like pliers or hammer. Visually, they're words. But what happens in the brain as you're naming animals? It seems like you turn on the visual part of your brain a lot. There's no animal in there. There's not even a picture of an animal. It's just the word elephant or the word cat. What happens when you're naming tools? In the left hemisphere, we see turned on an area here that's involved in visual motion, and here in physical action of moving things in the world. All you're doing is naming words, but it's as if the knowledge for naming them is located in the part of your brain that uses that information. Okay? If there's things I recognize by sight, the abstract knowledge about those things is near my visual system. If there's things I recognize by action, using them, the abstract knowledge of that is located in your brain near parts of your brain that move things and pick up things.
I mean, in a sense, it makes sense by itself because you have to accept you can't really comprehend something if you do not understand which functions it has in the realm of particular tools as it is being talked about here. How will you expect to really be able to describe something if you can't, or what, how will you be able to expect to describe a tool if you can't really describe the function itself that the tool realizes? Because simply saying that it is a conjunction of different shapes doesn't really explain any object at all, aside from the simplest part itself of the object that is, it might as well have a screwdriver. It has a pointy side, a finer, let's say, connection into an sturdy body, which you, no, not even a more description that is needed. Because if you were to say you can hold from the sturdy side and things like that, you're already started to delve into the sides or the parts that have to deal with the whole description itself of the usage of that tool. So it is kind of expected that when you are talking about tools, you also need to take into consideration that you need to comprehend them properly to describe them.
So all of a sudden, it makes sense that you can get separation in these forms of knowledge because they reside in your brain, near the parts of the brain that use them and communicate with them. So again, this idea that if it's something like a scissors, your knowledge about scissors will reside in the parts of the brain that act upon scissors. If it's something like a bird that you mostly see, knowledge about that bird, not just how it looks, but everything, will reside in parts of the brain that are focused on vision. So it's as if your knowledge is moved to the part of the brain that interacts with that form of knowledge. So let's talk about faces. I mean, faces are a huge thing for us. There's at least two huge things we do with faces. We recognize who people are and what their moods are, right? Angry, happy, nice, and so on. Here's one person. Here's another person. When I first used this picture, he wasn't a governor. He was a movie star. Now he's a ex-governor. And you have the problem that you have to recognize a lot of people because you have all your classmates and friends and family members and a lot of people out there. And not only that, you have to recognize the various expressions they have, which are terribly important for how we communicate with people moment to moment all the time. So we could say with faces, our big job is who are we looking at? Friend or foe, somebody loved, somebody we don't know, because that's going to have a huge, who is that person? And then what's the expression that we can read from their face? That's a huge part of our lives as social animals, as people who interact with other people. So you saw a film last time of a patient with prosopagnosia. Your book this time talks about a Dr. P. He's the man who mistook his wife for a hat. So he has bigger problems in vision than simply faces, but faces are very impressive. He fails to recognize his students by their face, but he can recognize them by their voice, modality specific. His general vision is okay. When Oliver Sacks visited him in his house, he tries to reach out his hand and took hold of his wife's head, tried to lift it off to put it on. He had apparently mistaken his wife for a hat, okay? His wife looked as if she was used to such things, right? Okay, you can see the head and the hat are kind of close, but not if you have typical vision, right? He might pat the head of water hydrants and parking meters, taking them to the heads of children. Right? So you can see there's a little bit of logic, but it's pretty wrong what he sees, and it's pretty meaningless to him. So let me show you a film of an example. You saw one last time.
Yeah, okay. Very good, very fine, amazing. Then let me intercept here. and try to make sense out of this. Because I will guess, in the sense of when you, yeah, when you are, so to speak, in the midst of trying to understand things instead of being completely lost, you also start to try and associate as many concepts as you can so that the world once again starts making sense in front of you. Because if you always lack the capacity of really observing and saying, yeah, this is what is happening right now, and this is what is going also to, let's say, transpire with this particular thing that I have in front of me, you will not really understand where it is that you're standing in your own reality, let's say. And I, yeah, I am taking it more from the side of how could we try to help anybody like that? And my idea is, what about trying to tell them what is happening instead of, wow, you put a fire hydrant, you're so funny. Instead, a proper analysis of the problem might as well reveal a proper solution for it instead of saying or standing like, yeah, in the side of it and acting as if it was normal or okay for nobody to take no action about it. But anyways, at the very least, also, I think it seems interesting the ways in which this connects to what we have been seeing in the sense of you might as well also see and observe and conclude that how much of a deeper connection it also has with other sides of our understanding, and not a deeper one, but rather an understanding pertaining to the reality itself of our whole lives, let's say. Because how many times it would have happened to people who thought they were completely able to understand their world that they misunderstood in those occasions particular objects or particular situations because in their brains the context was not the correct one, mm, pertaining to the different things that were playing a role inside of it, not just existing as if it was nothing. So yeah, I don't know.
So let me say a word about this. Imagine that if you couldn't recognize people, right? As you walked up, so much of how we recognize people, we don't think about this because we instantly, easily recognize those we know well is by their faces. I would say a couple of things. Usually that's posterior cortical lesions, like in this woman. I knew one man who was a Unitarian minister, who I work with actually a couple blocks away here, who went up to Dartmouth for the Winter Carnival, kept coming back in a small Volkswagen and turned over on the ice. He had a huge brain injury and became prosopagnosic. Could only recognize his wife by asking her to wear a yellow bow in her hair, because otherwise he couldn't pick her out from other people. When he went down the street and passed his brother, completely failed to recognize him. Then the brother spoke, then he recognized him, and he said, and this was his subjective experience, because you wonder, what do these people feel like they see? He said that what it felt like for his brother was, when somebody has some bad handwriting and you can't make it out at all, and then somebody tells you what it is, and you go, oh yes, that's that word, and now you see it. He said that's what it felt like as he heard his brother's voice and realized it was his brother. Okay, I mean it's hard to know how to relate these things, but the ability to recognize a person completely wiped out in these individuals. In the last
Okay, I think this is an interesting place to stop because I understand it very correctly. If you have ever suffered from vision loss, it also becomes a reality for you that when you are not really capable of seeing the things that are in front of you, when somebody provides the context pertaining to those different things to you, and even more, let's say, gives you of the capacity of recognizing those things, you also form and finally make a coherent judge about those words, objects, or people even. Because in a more deeper level, not, yeah, even more pervading the whole side of our brains and also the side of the ways in which we ourselves analyze the different realities, we do not only deal, let's say, with all of these realities that exist in front of us, but also the different things which aren't told. Like, yeah, for example, I would even guess if you were to get enough suggestions about a particular object, like let's say a lion is incredibly big, the next time you encounter a lion, because your subjective ideas about lions in general end up mixing with what is or what is not happening in that sense, you will end up seeing a lion as if it was already one of the biggest animals in the whole animal kingdom, let's say. When in reality, it is only something that happens to you because other people tainted with your vision of that particular object in this case. So, yeah, I don't really know. But, well, let us continue.
6 or 7 years, something else has been discovered. Now, let me tell you a word about this, which is instead of people with acute lesions that they got because of a brain injury, it's turned out there's a percent of our population that's really bad at recognizing faces. Not the occasional social embarrassment that many of us have when we see somebody we know we should know them or whatever, but they're really, really, really bad, okay? There's websites you can go to that let you test yourself because researchers want you to work with them if you're one of them, okay? And it's about 1% of the population. They're really, really, really bad. So there was one woman described it, she said they can't watch movies because all the characters look pretty much the same to them, okay? I mean, you can imagine that okay? One parent who has this problem, really terrible at faces by formal testing, says that when her kid comes out of school, her own kid, if he or is not wearing the clothes that she knows he's wearing, she can't pick him out from the other children very easily, all right?
Okay, wait a second here. There's something that happens, and I hope it is told afterwards, but something very funny that tends to happen in general in the world is we tend to have this particular problem with those who are from different, what is it, ethnicities from us. As somebody who is from Argentina, it happens to us, for example, that it is very common to have struggles recognizing the different faces of somebody who is Asian or somebody, well, somebody who is, let's say, from particular countries. Let's give an example of somebody who might be from China, somebody who might be from India, and if they are really similar, or not really similar, with all the characteristics of the, I don't want to say Genghis Khan. Is it Genghis Khan lineage? The people who is from Arab and all of those countries, um, all of those people, when here we do not deal with them so constantly in our lives, the moment in which we need to pick a particular individual from a multitude of them, we struggle because we lack also, let's say, the part inside of ourselves that is properly trained to do so instead of simply seeing them as something that exists or not. So yeah, I don't really know. It is something that is there, and it's something also that I don't know if it begs or if it deserves to be ignored so much. Yeah.
Right? So, and these are not people with big brain injuries. These are people who have some unusual difficulty in recognizing faces. So there's out there, and classroom this size, there easily could be one of you. It's just, we don't understand what that is. It's not a brain injury. It's just something, just like some of us can't carry a tune. Some individuals are really terrible at recognizing faces. They're really bad. So there's a lot of research into that to understand what that reflects. So let me tell you what we do understand about the neural circuitry in the typical brain for recognizing a face, a loved one, a person that you care about. So this is the fusiform gyrus. It's a structure in the back of the brain that extends from the occipital into the temporal lobes. And that's an anatomical description of this region. Within that region, there's a functional area that seems very important for face perception. And Nancy Canwisher, who's in our department, pretty much discovered this specific functional area in the typical human brain. And so she did experiments where she would present things like faces or objects and found that especially on the right, in this picture, left is right and right is left, there's a spot in the fusiform cortex that has this following property. Here's faces, it turns on. Here's objects, which have similar properties. It has a lot of visual information like a face, but it's not a face. This part of the brain region, not so interested. Faces, objects, faces, objects. So whenever faces come on, this is, by our understanding, the first part of your brain that says, I'm looking at a face. Up until then, it's just treated like other stuff. This is the first part of your brain that recognizes, I'm looking at a face. I'm starting to identify who I'm looking at and what feelings they might have by their expression. And Nancy and her colleagues have done all kinds of very clever experiments to show that the properties of this. Let me pick one. You could say, well, it's not about faces. Faces are about humans. Maybe it's a part of the brain that tells you when there's a human around you. So they compared faces versus hands. Here's hands. This part of the brain's not that interested in faces, hands, faces, hands. You see, every time it moves to faces, this part of the brain gets very strongly engaged. It's very much about faces by many research studies. So let me tell you a little bit about what we understand about faces in terms of development and things like that, because faces are such a big part of our lives from the first few moments we're born. In fact, a colleague of mine, Pavan Sinha, did a kind of autobiographical research study that was on the front page of the New York Times and earned MIT faculty the continuing names of being Frankenstein faculty. There was a number of faculty, right? And what he did kind of very cleverly was he put on his newborn infant's head a little camera. Okay? So he said, if I leave it on there and record it all the time, and apparently there was some debate with his wife whether he was allowed to do this, but they checked it out. It seemed okay by the pediatrician. He said, if I have the camera on the infant's head, I can see what the infant's experience is like moment to moment in the first months of its life. And I can also play with the video so that it has, roughly speaking, the properties of the infant's visual system, which is it can't see very far after its birth. It can only see very close by and not that well. Over the next several months, we'll talk about this later, because it gets better and better at seeing at a distance. Okay? So here's the infant sitting in his or her crib, and this video makes incredibly clear, beautifully, fascinatingly clear, something that I never thought of until Pavan did the study, this examination, which is, so the infant sitting there can't move very much, can't go very many places, right, as a newborn infant. So what does it see? What gets close enough to it to be visible to the infant? People's faces, okay? Because all the other cute things in the nursery, all the other things out there, they're too far or too blurry for the infant to process almost at all. Almost the only thing that happens is, the parent, the grandparent, the siblings, the friends who come over and go, what a cute baby, 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 baby. The face comes in, okay? Okay, all right? Person's done, gone. Now you're just sitting in a world of blur. Here comes another face, okay? All right? So besides certain issues related to perhaps the feeding, the only thing the infant sees are faces, all right? All the time. So it's a very important a social cue of who it's interacting and what's out there, and almost the only one available to it. So psychologists have been known for some time that if you show a very young infant a face versus something like an object, like a car or anything like that, they're much more interested in faces, okay, if you put them next to each other where the infant can see them. And they've been saying, well, is a brain born to process faces? And it might be, and I'll show you evidence to suggest in some general sense it is. What is that infant's brain drawn to? What does it find fascinating to learn about in the world? And so they've noticed that, well, one thing about a face is in terms of features, eyes, nose, mouth, top heavy, right?
Wait. Wasn't it? I hope it is there, because another one of the explanations that I know as to why an infant has so much interest in knowing the different faces that surround him is because thanks to that you can recognize who you are close with in the sense of a more primal level, properly assess with whom you need to go when something happens, and who it isn't that you should try to avoid, who you shouldn't disturb with your things. Because at the end of the day, it is not the same to go to your parents to talk about, not to talk, to cry about something when you're a guy, when you're a kid, than to go to a complete stranger and cry to them as if they were your parents. Because you need to recognize to whom, let's say, you pertain, who you belong. I don't think it is proper to say who you belong as a kid, but for the sake of this argument, let's use that completely improper terminology. Who you belong and who you are part of, and which tribe also it is that you are inside of, so that you can even more assess correctly to whom you should be, let's say, going for your things, and who you should be accessing when something happens, and when you even more need help in any particular area of your life. So yeah, I think that's it. Let's just continue.
Because we have two eyes and everything else is one and one, the nose and the mouth. So here's, you can move the features like this. And it turns out not only are infants more interested in this kind of face than this, and they know that because they'll put the two up and they'll measure how long the infant looks at one versus the other, which is interesting. And the infant picks this one. But get a load of this. The infant also picks this one versus this one versus this, and this one versus this. Now, these look very little like a face, right? But they're top heavy, okay? It's as if maybe the infant's brain, to start with, maybe, looks for some interesting top heavy things, and that pulls it into the world of faces. Here's some more experiments like that. So here's a, upside down, right side up. Baby looks more at this kind of face. Okay, you could say, well, that's a normal face, but it's also top heavy, right?
What the fuck?
Then
What
they make
the
these kind of
fuck?
scary looking faces, and now the baby, even though these are nothing like a face the baby ever sees, it still likes this one because it's top heavy. Now, how about this one? This is like a face they see. This is a really weird face, right? They'll never see a face like this except in this experiment. Top heavy, and now the infant looks at both of them with equal interest and delight, right? So that's a very clever experiment to suggest that the infant's mind is looking for top heavy things. And you could say, is it really top heavy, or is that what the infant's mind and brain can look for? and it goes with faces, and that was evolution picked that. It's hard to know how to think about these things, but it looks like the top heaviness draws an infant to be fascinated by faces, right? So, and luckily, you don't get many faces like this to confuse you, right, in the real world. Okay. Another thing that people study a lot about faces is this, so that it's incredibly, they use the word configural, that the relations among the parts are more important than the parts themselves. So I need a volunteer in their seat, and this is going to be really easy if you know the alphabet. You have to put up your hand and help me out. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to describe to you a letter by its features, okay? It has a big line at the top, and in the middle there's a line that goes down to the bottom. What's the letter? Awesome, okay, featural description. Now I'm going to describe to you a super famous movie star. And this person has 2 eyes to the left and to the right, a nose right below that, and a mouth right below that. And who is it? Angelina Jolie, right? Okay. Okay. So what's my point here is the stuff that helps us in many things, like the letters. Thank you. That was excellent. Okay. We can describe those by the parts, and the parts pretty much define the whole. That's not true for faces. Really, it's the precise relations between eyes and nose and mouth that tell us. And there's an experiment that shows this in a very empirical, direct way. So they would show people a face like this with a particular nose, or a house like this with a particular door. And then they would test your memory for that nose or that door by itself as features, or with the whole face or a whole house present, okay? And here's what happens for people's performance. The nose by itself, the door by itself, the nose, when you see the whole picture, it could be his nose, it could be another nose. Here's the door, it could be that door or a different door. And here's what happens in performance. If it's houses, people were good for doors about the same, whether they identify the door by itself or the door in the context of the house. If it's noses, they were a lot better off seeing the entire face. As if how we analyze even the parts of a face are really integrated immediately into the other aspects of the face. They don't stand alone. They're a part of a context all interacting together.
Okay, then.
Now,
wait.
here's something pretty striking and interesting, and we'll talk about it.
Okay, yes. Yes. Then what I wanted to say is, in that sense, it is very kind of, I don't know if the word is logical or not, but simply it is there to be analyzed. For it already has, so to speak, a very observable side on it that deals with, we can easily know that a face is a face by itself when everything is, in the same example that has been given many times, a symphony is being played. If you have a single instrument, you can take that instrument and put it into another face, let's say. It will not change the face, it will just change the way in which the whole face makes sense, but it wouldn't by itself make a face be less of a face. It will only change what you are seeing and what you are comprehending, let's say, but it wouldn't make that particular face and not face out of nowhere. It seems too interesting because it possesses, in a sense, mostly the capacity and the beautiness of being observed from the outside and being also, let's say, analyzed in a more deeper and interesting degree, because it can also start, let's say, making not only a congruent configuration, but also, what is it, a more complex one? I don't properly know. A more, I think the word is complex. I don't really know. So let us continue now. Wait, how much are we? Okay, we'll do some minutes more, and we have to close today.
Now, here's something pretty striking and interesting, and we'll talk about some social implications of this at the end of the lecture. So you can't ask infants many things, but you can record their behavior and learn some things about what their minds are representing and thinking. And here's how they test an infant at, say, 6 months of age. Can't talk, can't walk, can't be instructed to push buttons or fill out surveys, okay? How do they get inside the mind of what an infant knows? What they'll do is to show a face and pretend they show this face, all by itself. Infant looks for a little bit. Face disappears, and then they see the face they just saw and a new face. And infants who saw this face a few moments ago will spend more time looking at the new face than the old face. You can track where their eyes are. And that's the evidence they remember the face they saw before, because they selectively spend more time on the new face. And also, they're hungry to look at the new face. It's like, I've seen this face, been there, done that. Okay, new face, check out this person, all right? If you test them at 6 months, they'll have a preference, for the new face. But if you show them 2 different monkeys, and this might feel hard for you to tell these apart. If you show them 2 different monkeys, they'll behave the same with monkey faces as they do with human faces. They'll prefer the novel face, which shows you they remember what face they saw before and want to look at the new face. And at 6 months, it's the same for humans and monkeys. Now, at 9 months, don't forget, most of these people are interacting a lot with adults and siblings and caretakers, right? Not many of them are hanging out with monkeys. They start to get much more accurate for human faces. The experience they have with human faces starts to make them much better at that. At birth, faces from one species are as good as another, but with practice and experience, they become human face specialists, and they become much better at that.
Yeah.
So it's not in our genes to be awesome at human faces, but something about faces, and then a lot depends on what we see, and we grow that part of our mind and brain. So here's a remarkable experiment that you couldn't do with people that was done with infant monkeys. These monkeys, after they were born, were given no exposure to faces depending on the monkey for 6 to 24 months. That's not quite completely true, because at their birth they saw some faces that you couldn't start this experiment at the first moment of birth. But as soon as they could from birth, for 6 to 24 months, so when they were being fed, this is what they saw. They were given an interesting environment to see lots of stuff, and they would live in something like this. So they could not see another monkey. They could not see a human. They never saw a face except for the first moments of birth. Then they allowed them, before they saw any living face on a monkey or a human, they would do these kinds of experiments that you just heard with infants. And they would show that these monkeys would preferentially look at faces, both human faces and monkeys, and they had no preference between them. They would always go for a face compared to an object, monkey face or a human face. And they could do this kinds of discrimination the first moment before they had ever, except for whatever happens right at birth, seen one. So they never practiced on anything because they had not been allowed to see a face. But the first moment before they saw any living face, they already had this preference for faces for both humans and monkeys, all right? As if it's in our genes to be drawn to faces. And what the mechanism is, a top heavy, something else, we don't quite know. But it's in our brain to go for faces. They're so important for us. Then some monkeys hung around people, and some monkeys were hung around monkeys, okay?
Okay. Wait, what if, sort of, I made it up. What if it happens that somehow, when fucking God, what happens, or what will it be if the theory is okay? This particular thing happens because the top-down relationship and capacity of observing faces is created because you need to take into account the whole context of things. And even more, you need to not only take it into account, you need to integrate it as a whole thing. And one of the things that matters the most is you need to observe not only the smile or the frown that somebody's making, but also the way in which their eyebrows are working. And most of the times, if you decided to ignore something, you will not properly be able to make sense out of what you're seeing, because you can have either a smile, you can either have a smile with open eyebrows as if you were signaling happiness or surprise. You can have kind of a smile with, let's say, closed eyebrows, kind of signaling that you're angry, that you're, let's say, feeling very determined to do something. It depends based on the different context. And if, as a human, you cannot recognize these particular things and not make sense out of them, why would you expect to really say, yeah, this is something that I get, therefore it is something that I can keep working on? And it will make my life easier because I understand the environment in which I live instead of seeing it as something that is simply outer. Because I would say like that. Even in monkeys, if you see that another monkey is angry, you might as well pay attention to what are going to be his actions, aside from if they are familiar to you or not. And if you can see if they are angry or not, you might as well at the very least want to avoid them. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. But well, in this particular sense, in this particular day, in this particular everything, this is very sad, but we have to end this. Why? Because I'm on a tiny bit of a time constraint today, so yeah, I have to do it. Fuck. So well, it was a good stream. Anyways, we did it. We were able to consume every single thing that was said over here. Now, the only problem is we need to take a break, we need to relax ourselves. As always, it is a beautiful thing to be here, to progress, to learn, to extract a little bit more of information, and to keep obtaining more fruits relating to the side of comprehending. So, well, at least so far, yes. This is it. We need to take a break. And when the next opportunity arises, we'll find each other. Now, time to rest, time to properly take care. And yes, thanks for everything. But goodbye, and we'll see each other in the next